Today we talked about the difference between complaining and pouring your heart out to God. Now, anyone who's ever read the Psalms could argue that David was the biggest complainer in the Bible. Now, obviously, we know that David was a man that God himself called a man after God's own heart. So I think it's fair to say that God did not interpret the Psalms the way that many of us do. What can sound like complaining, and when I say sound like complaining, if you are familiar with the Psalms, we know that at times David would lash out, "God, my enemies are trying to kill me. Why have you done this? You've opened this grave for me to die and rot in." I mean, David was very, very real and raw in expressing his emotions, his frustrations, his anger, his fear. But there's a difference between pouring our heart out to God and complaining. Complaining is that broken record. "God, why does this always happen? God, this doesn't make any sense. God, why did you take me through all this?" That's different than lamenting to God and saying, "God, I don't understand any of this. This is frustrating. I hate this. But I choose to stand on your word." And ultimately, that's the biggest difference between complaining and pouring our heart out to God. It can sound like the same thing, but when we are pouring our heart out to God, we don't remain in our lament. We wrestle with God like Jacob wrestled with God, and from that position of vulnerability with God, we find the strength to stand on God's word and leave our cares with Him and walk out of that experience with strength.